Hi everyone. I didn't realise how much I had accidentally cosplayed as this mug until I sat down to film this video and saw myself in the viewfinder. So this is the look that we are going for today. Today I want to talk to you about book to film and TV adaptations. This is something that I'm really excited about, mainly because there were several books that I love that I knew were being adapted. So I had a list already on my computer, and then I decided to sit down and research some more, and now I have 40 to talk to you about today. Obviously books get optioned for films and TV series all the time, and more often than not they never see the light of day, but all of the ones that I'm going to talk to you about seem to at least be in production, if not with a full cast list and trailer and release date available. Release dates have been moving around a lot, understandably, recently, but I will link stuff in the description box down below if you want to go find out more about each of the books, films, TV shows that I'm going to be mentioning, because there are 40 to get through, so I'm going to be quite brief and selective. I, as you will have seen by the thumbnail, own about half of the books I'm going to be talking to you about today that are being adapted, and I have read and loved those. Then in my list of adaptations, I have a group of books I've always been intrigued by but haven't read yet and may read before the adaptation comes out. And then there's a small list of books that I've never been that interested in. They're just not my cup of tea, but I thought I would mention because I think that many of you may be interested in them. I always mean to mention this at the beginning of the month, and then invariably I forget, but I have remembered today. So let me just quickly say that if you enjoy my channel where I make videos about books and reading vlogs and videos about disfigurement and disability and the history of fairy tales, and you have the means to do so and would like to support me on Patreon, that's always very much appreciated, and I will leave a link in the description box down below. Patreon is a place where you can tip your favourite creators. I use it myself to support musicians, artists and other content creators here on YouTube. So if you would like to support me over there, that's lovely. If you don't have the means or don't want to, that's absolutely fine. I'm just mentioning it in case it happens to be of interest. Okay, so shall we dive into this list? I'm going to start with the books that I own. I think that's probably a sensible thing to do. Apart from grouping them into these are books I've read and loved and I'm excited about adaptations of, and then the other categories that I mentioned before, these lists are in no particular order. I haven't grouped them by release date or anything like that, but as I said, I will link stuff in the description box down below where you can go and find out more. Right, the first book on my list is an adaptation I might not actually watch, even though I love the book. So maybe that's a strange place to start, but I'm sure that this one is highly anticipated by many and I would like to watch it in the future. But it's a lot right now, and that is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Can you believe that this came out in 2014? I feel like it was much more recent than that, but apparently time means nothing anymore. This is a pandemic book, which is why I may not be watching the TV show when it comes out, I think in December, but we'll see how I feel. This is about a group of characters experiencing a world where a flu-like virus wipes out 95% of the population. So we start with that happening, but then the majority of the book is set after all of this has happened, and it's about rebuilding communities, finding food, sharing art. There's a lot about Shakespeare in here. It's a lot about theatre and performance, and that I particularly loved about this book. It's starring Hamish Patel and Mackenzie Davis, so I'm sure it's going to be great, but it might be one to put on the back burner for me for now. Then this one, I think, is the only one in this list that has come out. It just came out on, I think, the 29th of October on Netflix, and this is Passing by Nella Larsen, which is one of my favourite books of, was it this year that I read it? I know I said time meant nothing. I think I read it earlier this year, if not right at the end of last year. Anyway, I adored it. That's the point. I adored it. It is the book that The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett is based on, and that is also in the pile here, and we'll get to that in a minute. This is set in 1920s Harlem, and it's about colorism, it's about passing for white, and it's about two friends who meet in their adult life having been friends as children. It's wonderful. There is an audiobook that's narrated by Tessa Thompson, and Tessa Thompson does star in the film as well. So I'd highly recommend that audiobook, and then go and watch the film, which I haven't yet watched, but I plan to watch this week, and I'm very excited about it. Lanny by Max Porter is a film that has been adapted and directed and is starring Rachel Weisz. It's a film made by the BBC. I'm not sure of the release date, but this was one of my favourite books when it came out in 20 19. Again, I would recommend the audiobook of this because it's a full cast narration, and this really has a choral-like feel to it because it is all the voices of one village, and this village are looking for a young boy called Lenny who has gone missing and quite possibly has been taken by this mythical man who lives nearby called Papa Toothwort. Or does he live nearby? Is he a figment of people's imagination? It's such a wonderful atmospheric book, as all Max Porter's books are, and I'm really excited to see how they adapt this for screen because I can't quite picture it, but I'm sure they're going to do an amazing job. I find it really interesting when filmmakers decide to take a short story and then elongate it and adapt it into a film. They did that with Ken Liu's short story for the film The Arrival, which I really loved, and they've done it with one of the stories in Alexander Weinstein's Children of the New World, which is, it's not very similar plot-wise to The Arrival, which is about first contact with aliens and learning language and language acquisition and all of that stuff. But it is about technology and futuristic things. It is science fiction based, and I think it would make a wonderful film. I can't find out too much about this film, which is strange because it's been made. It's already done, and it was debuted at Cannes this year, but it doesn't seem to have a general release date yet. It's a film that's been adapted from a story in Children of the New World called Saying Goodbye to Yang, which is about a family who are dismantling an AI that has been living in their house for ages, and it's really emotional but also really dark. A kind of Kazuo Ishiguro look at the line between human and machine and how we can blur it and break it, and it's very unsettling. So the film itself is called After Yang, and they must stretch it out a lot because, as I said, this is just a short story in here and it focuses on one moment and isn't that full of plot, but hints at a huge world building that is outside of these pages. The film stars Colin Farrell as the dad, and I, as I said, don't have any other information about release dates, but I'm really intrigued to see what they do with this story. I mentioned Tessa Thompson before because she's starring in passing. She's also going to star in this, and this adaptation has just been announced, so there's not that much information about it, but Disha Filyard's Secret Lives of Church Ladies is going to be made into a TV series. This is a collection of 9 short stories about 9 different black women in different families. They don't interact with each other outside of the stories. They are standalones, but maybe in the TV series they will interact with each other. I don't know, but it's about how these characters are navigating queerness and relationships and trust, and how that intersects with their relationship with the church. It's such a moving collection, and if you haven't read it yet, I really, really recommend checking that one out. A book that I read earlier this year is Underbelly by Anna Whitehouse, and is going to be one of my favourite books of the year, along with The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. I think we're being spoiled at the moment with adaptations, or at least I feel like I am. So many of my favourite books recently are being adapted, and it excites me. So this is a book about 2 women who would probably never be friends if it weren't for the fact that their children are friends at school. It's a novel that looks at the dark side of social media, written by someone who uses social media for her job. And I appreciate that because I feel like it really can look at all of the nitty-grittiness in a nuanced way without sensationalizing things. It's like the TV show Motherland meets something dark and cruel. Content warnings for baby loss in this. It's a fantastic book. Next, my queen, Patricia Highsmith, has 2 new adaptations coming out in 2022, and one of them is a film, one of them is a TV series. The TV series is called Ripley, and it is based on the Ripley book series, the first of which is called The Talented Mr. Ripley, and Andrew Scott is playing Tom Ripley in this new adaptation. Dakota Fanning is playing Marge, and I'm intrigued to see if they do follow on through the rest of the books or whether the first series will only focus on this one book, because I need to know if I need to read the rest of the series before watching the adaptation. But I'm sure we'll find out more once they release more information. But this is a book that's set in the late 1950s in New York and then across Europe, as a man called Tom Ripley is essentially hired by a rich man to go and fetch his son Richard back from Italy, where he is wasting all his money and refusing to come home and get a real job. So Tom goes to try and coax Richard, but really he would just like to be part of Richard's life. And it has very sinister, not just undertones, overtones. It's great. And then there is a film also of Deep Water coming out next year, which is a book that I'm actually currently reading. And this is about a loveless marriage where the wife is having affairs very openly, is even bringing her boyfriends to their friends' dinner parties, you know, along with her husband. And her husband, Vic, has put up with this for a very long time in a very calm way. But there's lots of stuff going on beneath that calmness. And one day he decides he's going to spread a rumour around that he actually killed one of her previous boyfriends to try and deter new boyfriends from coming along. So that's the very beginning, and then things get more sinister as time goes on. Vic in this new adaptation is going to be played by Ben Affleck. There are no trailers available for this yet, but it is coming out next year. Also coming out next year is I think it's the BBC TV series adaptation of My Name is Leon by Kit Waal, which was one of my favourite books of the year a few years ago. Was it 2016? Maybe 2016 when that came out. And this is another one where I'm going to recommend the audiobook, because the audiobook is narrated by Lenny Henry. And honestly, it's one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. And I am thrilled that Lenny is also going to be in the TV adaptation of this. I think he's playing one of the men who have an allotment, if you've read the book. I think that's who he's playing, but I'm not sure. If you haven't read the book, it's about a young boy called Leon and his half-brother Jake. I think his name is Jake. They've been separated from their mother and they've been put into social care. And Leon is devastated because he's been told that he's not going to be up for adoption alongside Jake, because Leon is mixed race and Jake is white. Jake is also a toddler and Leon is about 10, I think. And the adoption agency says that Leon's probably never going to get adopted because he's 10 and because he's mixed race, whereas people really want to adopt white babies, so they split them up. And it is so heartbreaking that happens. But Kit, the author, used to work as part of an adoption agency or was a lawyer working with adoption agencies, so she has lots of experiences with this. It is a painful book at times, but also a really heartwarming book and a look at found family. It's set in the 80s, I think, if I remember correctly. Next is a book I read recently and loved and have spoken about quite a lot. This is Mrs. March by Virginia Vito, which is being taken on by Elizabeth Moss, who was in Top of the Lake and The Handmaid's Tale. She's going to be directing it and starring in it as well, and I'm sure it's going to be brilliant. So this will be a film. It's set in the 1950s. It's about a woman who's married to a man who writes books, and one day she's told by someone in a shop that the main character in the most recent book must be based on her, and how does she feel about that? She hasn't yet read the book, but she knows that the main character is supposed to be horrible, and she's just hugely embarrassed. And then she goes on this investigation to find out why her husband did this, and then unearths lots of other things in the process. It's a deeply unsettling book with an unreliable narrator, which I know has become quite an overused trope recently, but I feel like this one does it really, really well. Next is the TV series adaptation of Sally Rooney's Conversations with Friends, which is my favourite of her 3 books. This, I think, is scheduled for release early 2022. It's about 2 women who used to date called Frances and Bobby. And it draws a lot of inspiration from the film Frances Ha. I mean, the main character in this is also called Frances. Frances Ha stars Greta Gerwig and is about messy friendships and trying to grow up and figure out what you want in life. And just talking about it makes me want to watch it again because it's so damn good. So I'm hoping that the adaptation of this is going to give me Frances Ha vibes as well. So as I said, it's about 2 women who used to date and now they are friends in inverted commas, but it's very messy, and they each have a crush on different halves of another couple, like a married couple, and they meet at a dinner party. Is the book itself pretentious? No, but it has pretentious characters in it. I mean, I think some people would argue the book is also a little bit pretentious, but it's making fun of the characters in it and of itself. I don't think that you can take these characters too seriously. They are so over the top and all of them are pretty detestable. So if you enjoy reading about not very warm characters, then I would recommend reading this book before the adaptation comes out. Oh, I should say that I'm intrigued by the people who are in it, because 2 of them are Sasha Lane, who was in American Honey, and Jemima Kirk, who was hope in the later series of Sex Education. So I'm intrigued by these cast choices. Next, we have a film adaptation of Leave the World Behind by Rumen Alarm, which came out last year, was one of my favorite books of last year. I would say it's like Kazu Ishiguro meets the film Us, deeply unsettling, will stay under your skin for ages, even if you don't want it to. This is about a white family who go to an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, about an hour's drive out of New York, I think. And while they're there, all of the electricity cuts out. And then a black couple arrive at their door who say, we own this place and we're letting it out to you. And something awful has happened. Like, the electricity is out everywhere. We think there might be a war or a nuclear bomb might have gone off. Can we come in? And the white family are really suspicious of this black couple. Racism, and they don't really want to invite them into their house, and they don't believe that they own the house because they couldn't afford to buy it. So how come this couple own it? So there's a lot of social commentary going on under the surface. Julia Roberts is going to be playing the wife of the family who go to the Airbnb. Shala Ali is playing the husband of the couple who appear at the door, and I am excited. Next, we have an adaptation of one of my favorite books of all time. This is Poor Things by Alistair Gray, and this is being directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, who directed The Favourite and The Lobster. And I couldn't be more thrilled that he is adapting this book, because it's a ridiculous book, and I'm sure that he's going to have, or has had because it's finished, so much fun with this. This is about a man called Godwin Baxter who claims to have reincarnated a woman who he found dead, a pregnant woman, and he took the brain of her unborn child and put it in her brain and then brought her back to life. It's a play on Frankenstein and also Beauty and the Beast, and there is just so much going on in this book. I will link a review that I did in the description box down below, but it's starring Emma Stone, who is playing Bella Baxter, who is a woman who's been brought back to life. It's about proto-feminism, it's about science, it's about ownership of voice and unreliable narrators, because this is a book within a book. It critiques itself. It's fantastic. Next up, we have an adaptation of The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, which came out a few years ago. This is my favourite book of hers that she has written. It's about a woman called Cora Seaborn, who is recently widowed. It's set in 1893, and she travels to Essex, and it's at a time where people are unearthing dinosaur bones, and there's a lot of whispered folklore surrounding science. And I've spoken before about the intersection between science and fairy tales and Victorian discoveries, and I find all of that really interesting. It is starring Claire Danes and Tom Hiddleston. Sounds great to me. We are also awaiting the third series of His Dark Materials. I have loved the BBC adaptation of these books. The original trilogy is my favourite series of books of all time. This is the Amber Spyglass, the biggest of the three of them, and the one with the most breakaway characters, because we don't just follow Lyra and Will. I can't really talk about this book without spoiling the first two, but if you have been hesitant to watch the new adaptation of His Dark Materials because the film previously was so bad, don't worry, this TV series is amazing and I would recommend it. Super excited for the third series, which I assume is coming out next year. There is also going to be a TV series, I think it's a TV series, of The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, but there isn't much information about this yet at all because it's recently been announced. So I imagine next year at the earliest for that one. There's also going to be a new TV series adaptation of The Time Traveller's Wife by Audrina Finnegar, which came out in 2004. 2004. I didn't love the film of this when it came out, and I think because you don't have the room I think you need to truly explore all of the time travel in this. So I think a TV series for this is going to be great, and I look forward to seeing what they do with that. I think again that is scheduled for release next year. Now I have to refer to my list because we're out of books that I physically own. There is going to be an adaptation of Pachinko, which is a novel that I have thought about picking up time and time again. I think it's about a family from Korea, and it's a family saga, and I've heard such great things. So there is going to be an adaptation of that, which has no release date yet. It's being made by Apple TV. It's going to be an 8 episode series. There's also going to be an adaptation of Paper Girls, and I've heard people compare Paper Girls to Stranger Things. I think plot-wise they're different, but the premise is a little bit similar because it's about a group of, in this case, girls who cycle around on their bikes and then they get caught up in an adventure, and they don't travel into another world like Stranger Things, but they do travel through time to try and save people, and that sounds really great. It was originally a comic book series, and I'm very excited to see what they do with this adaptation. A book that I have never been drawn to because I've tried Don DeLillo before and I've just never really got on with his writing is White Noise. So an adaptation of that novel is coming out, but the reason that I am actually intrigued by it is that it stars Greta Gerwig and Adam Driver, and it's being made by Noah Baumbach. So that sounds like a recipe for a great film. So maybe I will enjoy the adaptation of it, even though I don't get on with his writing style so much. There's also going to be a TV series of Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, which again is a book that I've been meaning to read for years. It's about racism and time travel. Is time travel having a moment right now? Perhaps, but it is about a black woman who accidentally time travels back in the States to slavery times, and that's obviously a very terrifying time period to find yourself in, but then she's on a mission where she has to save someone who's awful, because if she doesn't, it's like a causal loop and it will stop her from existing in the future. And I think she goes back and forth throughout the novel. There's also going to be a TV series of Mouthful of Birds by Samata Schweblin. This again doesn't have much information about it yet, but that's a book I've been eyeing up for a while because it's a collection of surrealist horror, which sounds interesting. Then we've got on to the list of books that I'm not that excited about, but I just want to mention to you, it's going to be a really quick fire round here. There is going to be an adaptation of Heartstopper. There is a forthcoming adaptation, I think, this winter of The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante. They're making a film of the storied life of AJ Fikry. There's going to be a film of The Power by Naomi Alderman, which won the Women's Prize a few years ago. Wasn't a favourite of mine, but I know that it is massively beloved. Then there's going to be an adaptation of Where the Crawdads Sing, My Best Friend's Exorcism, Daisy Jones and the Six, The Nightingale, All the Light We Cannot See, A Brief History of Seven Killings by Marlon James, which won the Booker a few years ago, The Changeling by Victor Lavelle. There's rumours that there's going to be a new adaptation of the Earthsea trilogy by Ursula Le Guin. Interesting. Also going to be a film of The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. An adaptation which I think is nearly out is This Is Gonna Hurt by Adam Kay. There's going to be an adaptation of Waal, the trilogy by, is that Hugh Howry? And then there's also going to be a film of Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, which is being made by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Also on my list, I'm interested in, but I'm hesitant about, is Lord of the Rings. There is a new TV adaptation coming out next year, I think. And I'm intrigued by that, but was massively put off by the fact that they did a casting call for people with disfigurements who look weird to come and play the orcs, because they wanted a host of disabled people playing the bad guys. And no thank you, Jeff Bezos. So those are the books that I wanted to talk to you about today that are being adapted into films and TV series. This is not a definitive list. There are going to be loads out there as well that I either haven't discovered yet or weren't particularly interested in, so didn't include. But I would love to know what adaptations you are most looking forward to. I would love to know if you have read the books of any of the adaptations that I have spoken about today, and if you haven't, whether you are tempted to, whether you would like to read any before they come out. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you enjoy my channel and would like to subscribe or support me on Patreon, both of those things are massively appreciated. I hope that you're all having a good week, and I will speak to you very soon. Sending love. Bye.